probably have both under there.
Okay, now we're ready.
They use, you know, how those easements are, they try to cram everything. Are we waiting on? We're good? Okay. Looks like we're ready. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 2. This is a public hearing, so we'll open that public hearing now. It's a preliminary plat approval for a 14-lot subdivision to be known as Aberlour subdivision, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for everybody's patience with this. So the property is located at 11020 North, 5500 West. The applicant is requesting a preliminary plat approval for a 14-lot subdivision. The total acreage is 15.215, and it is outlined in red in front of you. The current zoning for the proposed area is R140. The proposed preliminary plat does meet the standard R140 requirements for setbacks and frontage and the number of allowed lots. There are various easements throughout the property, such as Salt Lake Metropolitan Water District, Lehigh Irrigation, and Rocky Mountain Power that the applicant is working with. Here is the proposed preliminary plat in front of you. So as mentioned, there are various easements throughout the property. We and the applicant have reached out to the various companies. Rocky Mountain Power has confirmed that there is a transmission line through their easement. They are requesting that 25 feet clearance be maintained from that transmission line. So if anybody is building within that easement, they would need prior approval from Rocky Mountain Power to verify that they are making that clearance that they need. They are requesting that Lot 11 to receive prior approval from them prior to issuing any building permit. They are also requesting that the road will be reviewed and approved to them prior to construction. Salt Lake Metropolitan District has also reviewed the plat, and they are requesting that the road crossing be reviewed and approved by them. We also reached out to them today, and they gave us a new stipulation to consider as well that they are requesting. So as part of your stipulation, staff is requesting an additional stipulation be added as well for the Salt Lake Metropolitan District. They are requesting that the swell on Lot 11 to be reviewed by them and approved by them as well, because it does cross over their easement. Lehigh Irrigation Company, for a stipulation, the ditch has to either be piped or abandoned, and it will be determined by them and our city engineer. Staff did conduct the DRC meeting April 9th. 18 residents did attend that meeting. Planning Commission notification was conducted for the Daily Herald public information site and mailed to all property owners within 500 feet. 5 written correspondence has received about the proposed plat. For your proposed recommendation and proposed motion, Planning Commission should hold a public hearing, accept the findings, and recommend approval of the proposed plat. It is an administrative process. The review of this plat is subject to zoning requirements. Staff was recommending 7 stipulations, but subsequent to the staff report being generated, we are requesting 1 additional stipulation of that swell to be reviewed by Metropolitan Water District prior to final plat. So 8 stipulations are recommended for you.
Okay. Is the applicant here?
Is the applicant here? I'm not sure.
They are. If they have anything they want to add? No? Okay. Then if the public has any comments on this proposed subdivision, please come up, state your name and where you live and what you'd like to say. Nobody? Okay.
We do have some people online. I'm unmuting them right now.
Yeah, I forgot about them. Do they have any questions?
They are all unmuted, and I don't see anybody raising their hands or anything.
All right, and we'll take some commissioners' comments, and if anybody else chimes in the meantime, we'll go back to them. So.
I think, sorry, the gentleman over there, I think, would like to. Were you wanting to, the gentleman up here? Yep.
Do you have something to add?
Yeah.
Sure, come on up. Tell us your name and where you live, if you would, please. Would you hit that microphone button down on there, down on the base? I think there's a little green button, yeah.
My name is Dwayne Jensen. I live in the Victor's Landing subdivision,
Okay. and
I've reviewed the plans online, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment on them. I've been watching this property for some time. I understand that there is a need for housing and so forth in the area, and I have no problem with the subdivision itself. There's a couple of details that I do have issues with, is the exit, of course, that comes onto Jonathan Lane. As long as the kids, they live there and have no high school students, we should be fine. But I'm afraid they'll have high school students, and they'll all be driving up little Jonathan Lane to try to get up and get to high school every morning. We added 5 houses in there in the subdivision, probably 5 years ago, on the Avenue subdivision, and that's been fine. You know, we put in some stop signs in there, which are run on a regular basis, and we're adding 13 and tripling the number of traffic that's going to come through there. I know there's an outlet planned to the west, but if you plan to get off onto, anybody's tried to get off from 11200 on the Alpine Highway anytime lately, at rush hour time or any time, it's very, very difficult. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, is that we need to prioritize construction traffic and maybe improve the traffic situation to use the west entrance to the subdivision in any way that we can improve that situation. Now, coming up Jonathan Street, Jonathan comes straight out to what I'll call North County Boulevard, and Jonathan reaches North County Boulevard when that street is very narrow, and there's very limited space in there. However, if you go over to 11200 north, there's room for a turning lane, and there's room for more traffic ahead. Get out of that street. You know, I guess one solution I'd suggest is some way, if they could find some way, instead of coming up Jonathan, to come out onto 1100 north with the traffic that would go to the high school and that wants to go to the high school area. So just a suggestion on my comments, and I think that take a second look at that. I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
I have one more comment. I noticed that on note number 1 of the landscaping plan, that they're planning to install indigenous trees in the park strip of all of that subdivision down there. And if you'll see the problem with that, that'll end up being a city and a local problem in about 10 years. Victor Landing's been in about 15, and you ought to come over to the north side of Sampson Court, Sampson Way, and see the problems we're starting to get with lifting sidewalks and lifting curbs with tree roots. So I don't think park strips area, I'm not against trees, but they ought to be put in the right spots. And park strip areas are just too narrow for the kind of trees that we're going to have in there in the future. They'll grow up, and the city will have to come in, or the neighbor have to come in and redo the sidewalks.
Well, they have to use a certain type of tree that doesn't do that, and it's approved by the city, so.
Yeah. I don't know what happened over our area, because we got the flowering power trees, and they're lifting the sidewalks very seriously and starting to lift on the curbs.
They're probably not the right kind of trees, because my subdivision's been there 15 years. We use a certain type of trees. We haven't had any issues, so it depends on what type of tree you use.
The problem is, you know, we thought over there about, well, moving the trees back, but when we find, as soon as we do the blue stakes and so forth, we find all the utilities are just on the other side of the sidewalk, so we can't move trees back on the other side to get the shade that we need and would like to have. But it would sure be nice if, you know, if we could not have this problem for these folks in the future. Okay. And I appreciate your time and listening to my comments.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else? Sure, come on up.
My name is Wally Western. I live on 541 West 800 South, Alpine, Utah. I'm concerned about number 5 on there where it says the irrigation ditch needs to be piped or abandoned. There are about 14 of us that still have water that we use every 8 days and 8 hours. And what is their thinking about abandoning the ditch?
Well, if it's used and you guys have permit to use that water and everything, they won't abandon it, they'll pipe it.
Okay, as long as we don't abandon it, because we
Yeah.
use it every...
If people are using it, it's always been my experience, if they don't abandon it, they always pipe it.
Yeah, because on the formal plat that I saw, of the subdivision, it showed the ditch running right through the middle of one of the properties.
Yeah, if you've got water rights, you need to talk to the ditch master there and make sure that they know that they can't abandon that. I mean, I'm sure they already do, but you could voice your opinion to them, is what I would do.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay. All right, commissioners, what comments do you have on this subdivision? And feel free to just go ahead and speak up. If you don't have any, then we'll entertain a motion.
So I shared some of the concern that the first gentleman, sorry I didn't catch your name, brought up. I drove through the neighbor over the weekend, and yeah, I think there's some really narrow road, and I like the idea of, if it's possible, to propose a avenue for the construction to drive and pipe all the construction crew through a certain route. Personally, I think Madison Avenue is wide enough. However, it does lack of signage, and it might create some additional problem with the traffic. But I think that will ease at least some of the concern with some of the other residents that live around the neighbors, since it's such a big subdivision.
Okay.
Hey, Mina, may I just ask a question? Are you talking about the other development? Because Madison is in the one we're going to talk about a little later.
Yes. Sorry, I was one ahead, apologize. Disregard. I was looking up.
What's that?
No, I said Claude, but I think thank you.
I just had one question. Hey, Nathan, why does Lot 11 have a special requirement to get approval from can't they just abide by the setbacks that are there?
So it's because the easement takes up a large chunk of the property, so if they're assuming that they're most likely going to be going in that easement.
They're not going to throw an additional restriction on them in the midst of...
No, so the
'Cause
stipulation...
I see the easement there, and I do see it eats up a lot of the property, but...
Yeah, so
Isn't that
number
enough?
6, it says, any building or roads next to or under the power line must have prior approval from Rocky Mountain Power before start of construction.
Right, but then it says Lot 11 has something special.
Yes, and that's the swell, because there's a swell on the property, and Metropolitan Water District is requesting that they be part of the review of the swell and what they're going to be doing with that lot on the west side for the swell.
Other comments? Okay, there are none, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. We'll entertain a motion on this item.
All right, just getting to it here.
So Chris, I'll go ahead and
Okay,
move
go
that
ahead.
the Planning Commission accept the findings and recommended approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 8 stipulations recommended by staff.
Yep, the 7 here and the 1 that we added extra.
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Audrey. Okay. We'll take a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes?
Yes. Audrey?
Yes.
Yes. Claude?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
I'm a yes, and then Mino?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, that motion passes. All right, number 3, what you're all here for, I believe. This is also a public hearing, we'll open that public hearing. This is preliminary plat for approval of a 70-lot subdivision, be known as the Hollow subdivision.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So this is for the Hollow subdivision. It's located approximately at 10250 North, 6531 West. It is 60.4 acres. They are in the R140 subdivision, and that would allow them 70 lots total. They are proposing 70 lots as part of this development. For your background, a little history on this property, it did come into review in 2019. During that review, the applicant was requesting a rezone. As part of that rezone, they were requesting 9 additional lots compared to the 70 that they are proposing today. The rezone was from R140 to an R130 zoning. It included a 7.4 acres of open space. There was quite a few public opposition for the proposed rezone. As such, the Planning Commission at that time did recommend denial of that rezone. For a little background on the administrative process, the preliminary plat process is a administrative process because they are going with the current zoning designation of R140. The site has been zoned R140 since at least 1993, probably since the city's incorporation in the 1970s. The development code is the primary review for administrative process, which means standards for lot size, width, street connectivity, infrastructure, and various other requirements. The property owner is entitled to develop the property according to these standards. If the subdivision meets these standards, they are entitled to approval. For the proposed plat in front of you, they are proposing a 70-lot subdivision in the R140 standards with the various setbacks of R140 and the frontage requirements. The property does have wetlands, and the wetlands need to be reviewed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They will be the ultimate body to determine the delineation of those wetlands and the bridge, which is the road connection on Madison Avenue. They will be the ones to determine if the lots are buildable and how much is buildable on that.
And the Army Corps of Engineers is gonna determine that?
Yes.
Okay, so each lot will have to have a letter from them, giving them the buildable area or approved plans?
Yes,
Okay.
and the road as well. So they'll have to do that for the road connecting over it. The applicant did start that process by having a report done, a wetland study by Wetland Resources. The proposed wetland delineation in front of you was from that report from Wetland Resource. Some properties around there have also but up to the Mitchell Hollow wetlands. Hidden Pond to the north, it's off of 10250, did submit for an open space subdivision. As such, they were able to give the city the property for the wetlands to have higher densities. Mountain View Acres was done prior to the open space subdivision, and they, as you can see from the plat, did not have any wetlands conservation on there. This was done probably in the 70s, and that's the plat in front of you. Willow Ridge to the east as well did have some wetland conservation area to the north on lots 2 and 3, but the rest of the lots don't show any kind of conservation area requirements listed there. Hollow Acres, another subdivision. This one's to the south. You can see from this one that they don't have any wetlands outlined on the plat or any conservation requirements. As such, a lot of the property has been built on. So for your wetland summary, with the proposed stipulation, more is being done to protect the wetlands than what has been done in the past. The final plat for lots not being recorded until the delineation is completed is one stipulation. We do have a conservation easement. The developer is also proposing a trail on the property as well, which a trail is not required as part of the R140 zoning requirement. This will give the public access to wetlands as well. So for the road access and circulation, there is a connection on 10250 North, 10200 North, which goes in the Wimbledon subdivision, Canal Boulevard or Madison Avenue, and 6530 West is the southern connection. They did have a traffic memo completed by Hales Engineering. The traffic statement did say that during peak hours, 74 trips to be anticipated with 750 trips a day on average will most likely happen from the proposed 70 lots. They did also state the road connection needs to be happening on 10250 North for circulation purposes. For 10250 North, it is a local road. The south half is not completed currently on the road, which would make the road currently at 24 feet of asphalt, which is a drive aisle. As part of the development, the developer will be completing the rest of the road width and adding curb, gutter, and sidewalk to that side, the south side of that road, which would include 10 feet of additional asphalt. The grade will match the existing road of 10250. The road connection cannot go east as it is private property, wetlands, and an existing trail is currently being on that property. So for the 10250 North road connection, we need it also for emergency access, dispersion of traffic, and Freedom Elementary is to the north, so this would help for that connection. There is a proposed bridge that is going to be going over the wetlands. Again, this will be controlled and regulated by Army Corps. Here's some other bridge examples that have been done above other wetlands in the area for your review. For citizen participation, we did conduct a DRC meeting on August 6th. 13 residents did attend the meeting. We did the appropriate notification for plating commission, which includes mailing to property owners within 500 feet, public information site, and the Daily Herald. We have received 8 written correspondence. In your packet, you only had 6. We received 2 new ones today. For your proposed recommendation and motions, planning commission should conduct a public hearing, accept the findings, and staff is recommending 10 stipulations to address concerns. The applicant is here to address any questions.
Okay. So if the applicant would have anything to add to us, come on up and tell us about your project.
Hello, it's Tyrell Gray with Millhaven Development. Always makes me nervous when nobody commented on the first one. At times like this, I want to share a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., who in a meeting similar to this one time stated that although the law can never force anyone in this room to love me, I would like to remind you that the law does prevent any violence directly to my body. Once again, we are excited to be back in Highland. We continue to come back to Highland. It's really an area that we've become very passionate about, and it's because of our clientele and what Highland has provided for residents. Highland has created an environment that is very conducive to families, and especially families that want to have larger private estates. This subdivision is something that we think will conform once again to the city guidelines and to our clients, and we've already got great clients that are looking at this subdivision, and we're excited to be working here once again. We appreciate your consideration and everything that the staff has done to help us get it prepared for this meeting. Any questions for me right now?
I just had a quick, I didn't really understand. Lots 55 through 47 that are right in that wetlands.
Yes, sir.
So the Army Corps needs to approve something there? Because as you look at
Yes.
it, it doesn't look like anything can be built on those.
No, so if you can go back to that, Tara, the building envelopes do not go into the wetland area, so it's kind of hard to see in that
So would the
design.
house be on that little piece up front,
Yeah, so up on the front is the flat part, that's where the homes will be, up in that area,
right?
and then the backyards will essentially be all the wetlands area.
You've got enough with the setbacks to put a house on there?
Yeah, there'll be smaller homes on those lots compared to the other lots, but they'll fit inside those building envelopes.
Okay.
Will they be able to, cross the wetland and put like a detached?
How the wetlands
The other
laws
part?
work is you can't build any permanent structure on the wetlands. They can landscape it, they can clean it up, they can have wildlife, they could, obviously there's wildlife in there, they could have livestock in there, but they can't have any permanent structure. They could on the opposite side.
Yeah,
If
that's
someone wanted to put a gazebo or something on that side, they could do that, as long as it was outside of that wetlands
outside
area.
of that green area.
Yep. And there's a couple, if you've walked the hollow, there's a couple that have done that. They've done stuff down in their backyards, gazebos and stuff, that makes it really nice areas for their families.
Yeah, it just didn't look like you could fit a house in the front.
Are you gonna do this in phases?
Yes, we'll definitely phase it out. We've had, like I said, a ton of interest in it right now, and the current interest, it's kind of a tougher layout as far as development goes. So the north and south road, we'll have to put that in first as far as functionality with the subdivision, but then we'll phase probably from north to south is the current plan.
Okay. All right, we'll take some public comments, and then you might want to respond to some of those afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got, if anybody wants to talk, just so we have it for the record, if you could fill out one of these and bring it up here, give it to us so we can have it on our record, that would be great. We'll go through these. If you want to come up, state your name and tell us what your thoughts are, that'd be great. Derek. You'd like to go after them? Yes, I would. Oh, okay. All right, Glade?
Thank you. It's great to kind of look and see what the plans are, and had a chance to look at them to kind of get an understanding of what happens. I moved my family here from New York City about 6 years ago, and chose Highland specifically because of its commitment to open spaces, larger lots, community. I saw the park, Mitchell Hollow. I saw a plan for the park where the Spring Creek development is, the Murdoch Trail. All those paths were things that were very attractive to me and my family in moving back to the area. So we happily purchased a property adjacent to the hollow on the east side, right against wetlands, with the expectation that eventually the trail along the west side would continue along and allow other people to enjoy the wetlands in the way that we do with our family today currently. That's not, in fact, when we made our plan to make that purchase, we did observe in the city plans and the master planning, we know that Highland has taken great commitment to preserve that type of community. We know that there was a commitment to preserve the wetlands and to have those commitments to the trails. In the master trails plan that was, I think, October 2013, that's available on the public site, shows that plan for the path going along the west side of the hollow. And that's not what we see in the plan here today. We see the bridge crossing the wetlands and then the path going directly along the east property lines of all the folks along that path. When we purchased our property, obviously we didn't purchase it with the plan that the path would go along the west, excited to see other people be able to enjoy it, not that it would run directly along our property lines. And I'm certain my neighbors also had the expectation that there would not be that type of a trail right next to our backyards where you would have to have some concerns around, privacy and safety. So that's my first concern, is that it's not according to what the plan that was laid out for us, upon which, most of us purchased our properties with that belief, and really value that unique property. I understand that we feel a little bit left out of the process, not being consulted around what happens with that piece of property. I know that it's privately held, but it is a wetland, and that's unique. That's something that can't be replicated, and would just like to be heard and considered and involved in the conversation what happens with that, as I'm sure the planning committee is as well, before any kind of decision is made. That can't be undone. You showed several examples of where the wetland was not protected, and we'd hate to see such a thing happen again, where it is not preserved for the community. So it's not a natural piece of property that is like any other one. and I think it deserves extra special care, and certainly the interests of more than just the seller and the developer. The community that's around it should be heard before a decision is made. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Lucy?
Well, I'm Lucy Holman, and I live in that same residence, 6391 West, 9960 North. And again, I reiterate, I love the trails. You wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I've ran and walked thousands of miles on trails, mostly in New York City. And buying trails were such a selling point for coming to Highland. And it is a public safety issue, I think. I was just walking on the Murdoch Trail right in Mitchell Hollow today with my dog, and a very quiet bike came up behind me, and it like scooted, and, you know, my dog she's untrained, and I'm a terrible owner, and it could have been disastrous, right, in just a second. I've also been on the Murdoch Trail, and I had an injury. And luckily I was with someone, and her son was driving right by, and with stubborn will, I was able to get in his car, you know, hobble out of that trail and get to a car. So the proposed stretch of trail from Canal Boulevard from 9860 North to 10250 North is over 1,000 yards, with no access for public safety vehicles. Should someone have a medical issue or start a fire in that area, emergency vehicles would have a difficult time accessing that area of trail.
1,000 yards or 1,000 feet?
1,000 yards. It is larger than any other, even with the Murdoch County trails, it is larger than unaccessible. Yeah, if you go all the way from point to point over the bridge that they're going to make, and that's like 10 football fields. Very difficult. All hollowed in by our backyards. I think it would. I'm very community minded. I love sharing, and I believe in public spaces, and I really hope that people can come and enjoy that trail, but without having the bike path. And you don't want to put so much path in there, right, to ruin that beautiful wetland. It would be negligent to decide on this tonight without addressing the safety issues of this trail. Thanks.
Thank you. I should also mention, we do have quite a few comments here. If you could try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and you know, once we've heard an item a few times, we've got it noted, so we don't have to say the same thing over and over again. That would be great as well. But Lori.
Hey, Nathan, how wide is the trail?
It'll be 10 feet.
You ready for me? I got a smile so I can loosen up a little bit here. You're a little intimidating. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. My name is Lori White. I live on 6382 West, 9890 North. And I have lived in Highland for 12 years. And like so many of us here, we have strong feelings towards our community and our city. And we want to share, we want to build, and we want to protect. I would like to address the issue of the setbacks on the 10 lots along Mitchell Hollow. On page 30 of 128 in the staff prepared report regarding this development, the setbacks are shown for the 10 lots inside the hollow that we're referring to, but they are never shown overlaid with the wetland area that is shown on page 33 of the same staff prepared report. When that site plan with setbacks is overlaid against a current Google map, the overlay shows that lots 38 through 44 actually overlap the wetland. This development should not be approved until those setbacks are adjusted so they do not overlap an accurate survey of the wetland's edge.
You know each lot's gonna have to get approved from the Army Corps of Engineers.
I can see that, and I'll tell you, my worry is if, I guess the whole development has to be approved first, because that looks like that could create almost a nightmare for builders, that whole edge. We all live along that edge, right? We can see what you're saying is a very complicated issue for any kind of builder.
Well, if you've ever dealt with the Army Corps of Engineers,
They're
they're
pretty
a lot
complicated.
stricter than we are.
We hope so. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm also happy to send you, the overlay that we have. I can email that to the city later.
Yeah, the
after
Army,
this
just
meeting.
so you know, I've dealt with them a lot, the Army Corps of Engineers is extremely protective of their wetlands.
So whatever they have on the setback, you're saying will be automatically adjusted by the Army Corps?
It has to be.
Okay.
If somebody encroaches on that wetland, the fines are astronomical.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. I've had issues with them, and you do not want to cross the Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, Robert.
Good evening. My name is Robert Lewsley. I'm a resident of Willow Ridge Estates. We moved to our residence. We bought the residence about 10 years ago after living in Los Angeles and Mexico City, so we were anxious to get to somewhere that had wide open spaces. We chose this area because of the land behind us. It reminded me of my youth in Cache Valley, Utah, looking at farming and everything. We understand that development has to happen, and so I'm not opposed, my wife isn't opposed to what goes on as far as constructing homes, but we are very concerned about the fragmentation of the natural green space behind us. And I'm glad that there was some history given first to show the many years back how the green spaces were ignored and no action was taken to preserve them. I think it's time now to try to limit the fragmentation of the green space to numerous owners. Once you have a number of owners owning the wetlands, it's harder to control its preservation. It's more difficult to monitor, to regulate, and to enforce the codes and regulations. Many of these homeowners, when they buy it, we heard from the developer that they're going to be able to build on one side of the wetland and on the other side. So that means they're going to have to go through the wetland to get to, from their house to whatever they're building, a gazebo or whatever else on the other side. And it's just going to ruin the wetlands, people going back and forth between them.
So what's your recommendation if you don't want to parcel off to individual owners?
My recommendation is either we look at a way to preserve it through a foundation, through the city buying it, or through a consortium of individuals that will preserve it, or the developers themselves preserving it as a whole, and the developers can use that as a selling point for their homes when they have a nice 8-acre wetland for everyone to enjoy, without having a lot of owners who are using it as they see fit. If it is sold to a variety of owners, if it is split up, then I would recommend that there be very concise, precise, and detailed regulations as to its usage, its enforcement, and what is done as far as penalty or how it is enforced. And I think we need to know as homeowners who abut the wetlands, who is enforcing it, and what the usage is going to be. Because I hate to see a gazebo go up here and then a tire laying out in the middle of the wetlands, or some kid running from his house to the gazebo, leaving things strewn around the wetlands and not making it accessible for the creatures that live there, the animals that live there.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great idea to be able to have the city have tons of money and we just go buy it for a couple $1 million and preserve it, but.
Well, Highland has done a great job of creating parks and everything, but they haven't done a great job, obviously, of preserving wetlands, as was shown at the beginning of this slideshow.
You know, the
So
economy
this might
we
be a
live
good
in,
time.
realistically, we just don't have the money to do it.
Right, but it might be a good time to start looking at doing that, so we can preserve something in Highland where there are some wetlands. Or at least create regulations where they are preserved. If you have 10 owners that are using the wetlands and doing whatever they want with it, And we heard that from the developer himself, that they can do what they want on either side of it. And we need to have some type of regulation what goes on in between.
Well, I think the Army Corps of Engineers regulates specifically what can happen on those wetlands. Now, on the other side, where it's not actually in the wetlands, they can build a gazebo or something like that.
Right.
But actually in the wetlands, there's some pretty strict rules on what you can and can't do.
Right, and that's my point.
Yeah.
If you have.
I don't know who enforces those. Nathan, the city doesn't enforce wetlands, do we? Is there a governing body that comes out and checks on those, or are they done by complaint, or how does that happen?
So, I mean, one of the points of showing those is wetlands can be in private ownership and be preserved. They are, so it depends on how they're protected through a conservation easement or whatever. The other point of showing those examples is we're trying to do more than official protections than what was done in the past.
I have a question for you, and Chris, maybe you have some experience with this if you've worked with Army Corps of Engineers. Maybe you should understand what I'm saying. I am curious about fires. We've had fire issues to the extreme, very locally. I was crossing down Timpanogos Highway and watching what was going on in the little hollow in Dry Creek on the Highland side. There was some people burning big bonfires on their property right on the edge with total dried out vegetation. And since we keep the wetlands natural and we have our natural vegetation that's very flammable for at least 3 months, I'm just curious, do they make regulations for the property owners whether they can use, everyone here seems to need a fire pit or burns all this extra leaves and everything that we have. What is that regulation so that we're not putting large areas?
I don't know what their current regulations are. We
You don't know
probably
if they do?
ask the developer if he's been in touch with them and what his plan specifically would be for those areas.
Is there any kind of mandate or safety for wetlands that doesn't allow owners to do fires within the boundaries of that area? I was listening to the previous explanation where there's no road access for emergency vehicles to be putting things out quickly, and just curious about that.
Well, I believe cities can mandate where certain types of fires can go and where they can't go in their city. So that could be something we could look into, I assume. Or maybe you just do, propane type stoves or fire pits, nothing else.
A lot of people take care of their natural landscape waste burning, and that was kind of what I was seeing going on. So I was just curious about that.
Burn permits are actually regulated by the state. You can get permits through the fire chief, but they're actually regulated by the state. If you have ag property, it's different also. A lot of the stuff, the big stuff that you saw is actually ag property that's still in the county and not city limits. So
And it was
different
just right on the
regulations.
boundary of all that dry, so that was something I'm curious about.
I lived there. I lived 3 houses west of Mitchell Hollow Park, and I was on that path in the middle of this last night, I think. When you're talking about wetlands, are you talking about that giant patch of weeds that goes down behind those houses? There's a path that goes down, and if you take it far enough, you come out on a little farm. Is that what you're talking about?
We're talking
Because
about-
I have no idea why anyone would want to build there.
You really can't build there. And one of the issues too is we made contact with Greg at the Utah County Community Development Office, and he says there's already a number of violations to the wetlands, and of course, nobody's controlling that. So again, my concern is, if it's not under one ownership, if it's going to be under 10 or 15 people, we need regulations that the city, the county, I'm sure has them, but the city, through the Army Corps of Engineers, need to establish the regulations. We need to know what they are as far as usage, then how it's going to be enforced and who's going to monitor. If there are already violations by 1 or 2 people and you have 15 more people moving in there, then we need to have, the city needs to have, to preserve the wetlands, some type of regulation and a way to enforce it and monitor the usage. And that's my point. you know, ideally, yes, it would be great if one person owned it or the city owned it, but we know it can't happen, so we need regulations. And absent those, I don't think we should be approving anything tonight. If
Well,
we don't
somebody
have
could start a foundation and go in and buy all those lots and keep it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. He'll
Or
gladly
maybe the
sell
developer
them.
can help us out with that.
Yeah.
Let me also say that I think the people who live on the east of that have done a great job of making it pleasant to walk along that path, except for the giant sticker bushes. I mean, somebody has gotta get this under control.
Yeah, we've tried not to, well, we don't have any fireworks on our property. We don't have a fire pit, and I know the fire pits that are along that, area are set back toward the homes. They're not, you know, in close range to the wetland area or to that area, because it is very dry.
Yeah.
And so I think for the past 10 years that we've been there, we've been very successful not having any fires or anything. But with a whole bunch more people coming in and using it as they please, we need to have some type of regulations there.
And isn't it on the west like a 45-degree angle that comes from that hilltop down?
Just about, yeah.
I'm not sure how you would build there. You'd have to
That's
fill it all in.
That's another issue.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Devin? I have that right?
On spell check, it comes up as devil all the time in the old Microsoft. My name's Devin Dyer. I live on that hollow. I have two recommendations for you. First of all, everybody that lives on that hollow are outstanding people. And the developer is also an outstanding developer. If there's somebody that's going to develop there, that's who we'd want to develop. My two recommendations are that you find a way to regulate the wetlands so that there's no damage done to that. Christopher, you said that we don't have any money in our budget to be purchasing property. And this was my issue last time when they were looking at a subdivision here, is they're looking at putting that trail in again. And I'm not a lover of trails. My wife makes me go walking on Saturdays so I don't die on the Murdoch Canal Trail. So I can find it. I don't need access in my backyard. But I would recommend that we don't put that trail in at all. Number one, I think it's a safety issue for the fact that it's going to expose all of our residents to that main road that's going to be coming down from Cedar Hills. And we already have people that park there in that cul-de-sac that we have trouble with. And the people I think that will be using that trail are people that shouldn't be back there using it. Everybody right now has access to get to the main trails. But the other thing too is we have trails already that are asphalt trails in Highland City that by our own admission we can't afford to maintain. And I owned an asphalt maintenance company for probably 15 years where we maintained city roads like what you guys have been doing with Crackstone and that. And those trails are going to dry up and crumble, and in 20 years we're going to have a bunch of crud behind our house that's just a dried up asphalt trail that was a great idea. So I don't understand, especially where this is a wetland issue. I say let them figure out how to develop on that other side. They need to get together with the Army Corps of Engineers, whoever, to find out how to be responsible in developing that. Let them do that. But why would we then come on this other side, on the east side, and put in a 10-foot wide asphalt trail and then damage that side? If the issue is they want to develop and build, let them work on the west side, and let's leave that east side the way it is so that it is wetlands and the natural habitats there. But the last thing I want is any asphalt trails put in that we're going to have to maintain, because I know we don't have the money to take care of them. So that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Tara, is this going to be an HOA subdivision? Is this going to be an HOA subdivision? So the city will be maintaining the trail, not the...
The open space that they're demonstrating on the east side will be dedicated to Highland City with the trail.
Okay.
Who puts the trail in?
The developer is proposing to put the trail in.
Is that a requirement of the city?
No, so that's just them offering to do it. The trail has been master planned with Utah County Mountain Land Associated Governments. They have the trail master plan to connect through. And so the developer is proposing doing that. They are not getting any density or anything in addition by offering that.
So that other portion after it goes off of their property, is that trail installed now?
The southern portion or the one northern?
The
one
north,
up on
north
skinny
portion.
part, the northern part that's off of their.
So that one's already an existing trail. We would have to look at updating, I think it needs some work on it, if I remember
It's
correctly.
paved.
Yes, it's,
So there already is a trail existing on the one side.
yes, going northern connecting to the park.
So is there access to the homes that, from the property line to the trail they're proposing to put in between houses? Is there any kind of,
No, so for this proposed plat, they are representing the open space, so it'll be Highland City property. It's not gonna be private ownership for
I
that
just
open
meant, is
space
there
trail.
road access between properties at all to the trail behind the homes?
No, so the access would be from that Canal Boulevard or northern from 10250.
Thank you.
It's just a little valley.
I just have one more question. If you guys remember, in the last meeting we had, it seemed like Highland City was negotiating with some of the property owners, that the property owners were actually going to buy the property back that Highland City had, and with the trail on it because they couldn't maintain it. So I just don't want us to see us be putting more asphalt in to where we're gonna create more issues.
Right. Thank you, Dylan. Okay, sorry if I butcher your name. Is it Lori or Lewsley? Another one?
Hi, it's
Hi.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Lisa Lewsley. It's a tongue twister, all right? I'm here to reiterate just the green space and preserving that green space. And I do think that if we break it up, that it will just be fragmented. And we do have, it's not an ugly space back there. You just went on the ugly part, I guess. Because it's beautiful when you get back in there. There's wolves and there's deer that come through the big
I
duck
know,
and
I
everything.
know, but
It's gorgeous.
It's hard to
really
take grandkids too far.
pretty. Anyway, I just think I grew up coming into Highland and playing in the ditches, and there's just this quality that Highland has. That's the draw of Highland, is the beauty and the farming and the community. And I think everything up there looks really good except building on that green space, that beautiful green space that unfortunately is disappearing in Highland. And I think if we could just somehow work it out to where we could improve that. And I know now, listening to everybody with the engineer people, that they have to approve the building on it. I think I'm more enlightened now on that point. But if there's anything we can do, maybe give us a little more time so we can come together more on this. I think it would benefit everybody. If you live close to it, you could bring your grandkids and see the deer and see the little animals that live on our space, this beautiful place that we have. So I'm gonna keep it short and sweet and just appeal.
The easiest thing would be have a group of you get with a developer and see if he can maybe do that in a different phase. That would give you guys time to maybe come up with a plan or a foundation or some money or whatever, and then you buy the land from him and it's preserved. That would be the easiest way to do it.
Oh, do you think he would do that?
Sure.
Do you think he would let us buy that property back?
Well, why wouldn't he? It's for sale.
Well, I don't
And if he
know.
doesn't have to develop that, he doesn't have to put utilities on them and everything, that saves him a ton of money.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I think we'd all be willing to get together.
You get the
and do that.
governments involved, cities and states and all that, we just mess everything up, so.
Yeah.
Try not to, but a lot of times it's a better way if the residents can get with a developer and say, hey, what can we do here? You know what I'm saying?
That's a great idea. I hope we can come to that. Maybe
And we do have a good developer here, we're lucky. There's a lot of developers who are not willing to work with residents, but I know Millhaven Home, they're a good company.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dennis.
Okay, so, I live on the, 250 street, And there are several of us there that are quite concerned with the road coming out at that place because of the number of children that are going to school down that direction. I just wanted to make a couple of clarificatory things. The point was made earlier that if the developer meets the code, he's entitled to approval by the Planning Commission. And that may well be, but the decisions of the Planning Commission can be appealed, and then they go to the City Council. And then according to the code, the City Council is not bound by the City Council shall not be bound by the recommendations of the city staff. The Planning Commission may set its own conditions and requirements consistent with this code, which tells me that if the City Council feels that it is not safe, then they can vacate the decision that was made. Our concern is that if that road comes out like this, then the cars, and Tara was mentioning all the number of cars that daily would be coming out there, the cars and the children would be coming out that direction and going up towards the school. And we tend to think that we're not persuaded that the road cannot go more east. The Reinhardt property goes down further until that other property that is for sale. And that's far enough down that you could bring the road out closer to the park. And that would then lead the cars to go that eastward route, and then the children to go on to the trail and then go up to school rather than that other way. We just think that it is just too dangerous, that the street is highly sloped up, and a lot of people don't follow the code for how fast they're supposed to be driving. We just don't want to see accidents occur there. So we would like to see some stronger evidence as to why that road cannot be built more east before that other property that is for sale that's next up to the wetlands.
Okay. I'm not a traffic engineer, but they have to do a traffic study on everything and explain the reason why every road goes in.
Right. Apparently there was a traffic study done on the other side, the other exit, but not on that side. That's what we understand. And we would request that there be a traffic study that be done there with some sense of whether that is safe and also why it can't be done closer to the park where the cars would go out and would be separate from where the children would go.
Okay, thanks, Dana. Okay, Polly?
Good evening. Thank you so much for hearing everyone, and thank you to the Planning Commission. I know it's a volunteer position, and I really appreciate your time. I am an attorney. I'm representing one of the landowners' neighbors, and I've been doing land use for over 15 years on both sides. Worked for cities and still do, and as well as this side. And the biggest request is just let's slow down. Let's continue this for at least one meeting so that the neighbors and the developer can have the opportunity to talk, and also to make sure that the Army Corps has time to look at this, and so that you know what is actually being approved. It always makes me very nervous when you have something, I recognize this is a preliminary plat, but on the other hand, what you have is once you've approved it, you have vested rights. And
But they already have the vested rights by the zoning.
well, they have the vested rights for the zoning, but right now what you're saying is, well, there are 9 lots that may be buildable, may not be buildable. And what my concern is that that Army Corps review could change the entire layout of the subdivision, because if the Army Corps says that the wetlands are a little bit more than what they have shown, and note that that report was done July 14th of this year, so it was barely a month ago. This has been one of the driest summers I've seen in a while, although every summer seems to be hot and dry. It feels like that right now. But, you know, it's a very dry time. The Army Corps hasn't commented on it. I don't even know if they've received it. And so what might happen, I spoke, and I want to say also thank you to Tara Tannehill as well as to Todd Train, the city engineer who I spoke with today, who I think the staff report is very well written, and they're both very knowledgeable. And even Mr. Train said, he said, well, you know, if they don't have enough room, they might have to move back that road that it fronts on so that they can have more, so that would allow them to build houses there. Well, that's going to change the entire subdivision. So let's not put the cart before the horse. We're not asking for a long delay. We're just saying, let's wait one meeting so that we can get more information. And, I mean, as you noted, not only do you have those wetlands on those lots, but you also have it be very steep. And as you've heard from all the public comment, no one's contesting those other 61 lots. I mean, that's fine. We're not trying to take development away from the applicant, but what we're trying to say is, hey, these 9 lots really aren't appropriate to become lots right now. It's so steep, you wonder how that, building on that steep lot is going to affect the wetlands, and if that's going to damage it, and especially as we're hearing here that there may not be a good enforcement mechanism until it's too late.
But if they get approval from the Army Corps of Engineers, how can we ethically deny a property owner the right to do what they want with their property?
Well, let's wait. They haven't gotten that approval, though. So I recognize that, and that's absolutely right. And the Army Corps is here to help save those wetlands. But let's get that approval first, or at least know that it's in the process and see and get feedback from the Army Corps before we approve this. Because, and there's other things that are lacking in the application. For example, you need a soil report according to your code. Number 5-4-312 says that a copy of a soil report should be attached to the preliminary plan, and that's not in the application. In addition, it says that there needs to be a culinary water and sanitary sewer authority approval, and I didn't see anything that's been done yet. That's getting punted. But your code in 54305-3 says that needs to be done. Those things should be done before, per your code. Another, and I don't know if it's minor or not, I tried to listen in to your meeting on my way driving here, and I couldn't get on the YouTube channel, wasn't transmitting live, and I tried to call into the number, and it said it wasn't a valid meeting. So I don't know if there are people that were trying to also call in this evening to participate or to even listen, because as we know, that's so important, and they didn't have that opportunity. So that's something also that should be rectified. And there are questions also, you know, about the road. There are a lot of questions about the road, and that too is going to be very linked to that Army Corps of Engineer approval, where it can go. So let's wait and get more information. Let's not rush this. Same, the trail right now as it's proposed is 400 feet across wetlands. And it's just so hard to maintain the approval. It's better to, let's wait and see and then approve. I'm not saying that they're not entitled to build, and if the Army Corps says yes, then okay, yes, but let's find out exactly what the Army Corps says.
They can't build anything on there without their permission, without their letter.
I know, but you're going to have a preliminary plat that might need to be changed if they don't.
That's on them, then they'll have to change it to fit the Army Corps. So if they go ahead and put a road in the wrong place, and then the Army Corps says you can't build there, they have to change it.
But the whole purpose...
But they would never get that far, because it's, so many things have to be done before they get to that, putting a road in, that would never happen.
Maybe, Chris, can we ask the developer how far are they into this process with the Army
Yeah,
Corps?
I
And when?
plan on having
Okay.
him back up after she's, you know,
And-
after we're done with some of these.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're making some notes on these comments.
And part of this also, so when I looked at, you know, preliminary plan, the purpose under 54301, it says part of the point of a preliminary plan is to minimize changes and revisions. So again, it's just saying, hey, we're not saying this can't happen, we're just saying, let's wait, let's not only make sure that we know exactly what can be approved here, so that it is not changed a lot after you get that, once you hear from the Army Corps, but also it would give your citizens who are very motivated and care a lot about this space time to work with the developer. And I know that we reached out to the developer and we didn't hear back. So now I'm so happy, I mean, that we have a really good developer here. He's here. It gives us the opportunity to meet and try to see if we can work something out that's a win-win.
So wait, I'm a little confused. Nathan, I thought there was an outreach meeting between the developer, public meeting. Did you attend that meeting?
I did not, and I don't.
So the developer did have a meeting, the public was invited, and you didn't attend that?
I wasn't notified of it, nor was my client. So I don't know
So
how.
it's mailed within 500 feet of the property. It's a Development Review Committee meeting, and that was conducted on, I can find out in a second.
So if your client lives within 500 feet of the property, they should have been notified.
August 6th,
Right.
2020, 13 residents attended the meeting.
So, okay, so we've
So
got
that
meeting.
wasn't a
So the
developer's-
developers had a meeting?
Well, that means that the city had a meeting
No, was that
for
with the
development
developer?
review.
That was with the
Developer
developer.
did attend, and we conducted the meeting here. in
Yeah, we
Highland
have
City.
those meetings so that when we get here, we're not saying we all need to talk to the developer. That's the part of the process. And so there was a public meeting. They were notified. They had 13 in attendance. And that was the time to say, hey, this is all of our concerns, not in this meeting.
Well, sometimes people aren't available or,
Can't keep planning and, hey, 4 people couldn't log on, and so now we have to redo the meeting. Okay.
Well, and I understand, but you know, if you, we're not trying to rush this through. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate for a minute, but, you know,
Being told
if
we're
you're trying to
rushing it.
accommodate everybody while they're in town, then, you know, how are you gonna do that?
and in my mind, and the way I've seen, that's great that you have that public notice for a development review meeting. To me, that's very different than a developer outreach. When I see a developer outreach in other municipalities, other jurisdictions, often they put out flyers or knock on doors or put up a website and say, this is how, you know, talk to us. And
Yeah, I'm a developer, and I do exactly what he does. I meet with the public. The only way to do that is to notify them. They come in, we take their concerns, we put them in our plat, and we move through the process.
well, so at this point, the public is asking to have just a little more time to try to work those things out.
And what my experience is everybody gets wanting to meet when something's presented and put in. Because I remember a meeting on this, how long ago?
At least a year ago.
May
A year
2019.
This came to us a year ago with higher density, and the wetlands were preserved or something at that point. So the wetlands were totally preserved, and in exchange for that, the developer wanted higher density, and everybody said, no way, we're not doing that. Forget the wetlands, we want less density. So he comes in with what he has legal right to do. He says 70 lots, and now all of a sudden the wetlands are going to be owned privately by which the lots are for sale, by somebody else, and now it's, oh, let's save the wetlands. So if he were to come up here and say, can we go back a year ago and do the higher density?
Yeah, I think he wanted 79
That's a way to
lots,
preserve a
which was
wetland
entitled to,
without
but he
getting money.
preserved the wetland.
Right.
And everybody came in here with a huge uproar, no, you can't do that. You,
Can you talk into the microphone so we can record
sure,
it?
come on up. Just state your name, though.
Yeah, I'm Derek White, and so, yeah, thank you. Thank you to everybody. I understand that you're volunteers. I know that you're elected, but you're not paid, so we appreciate you doing this. But let me.
And you also understand that we can only do what the code allows us to do. We're not a body like the city council. We can't do political things.
Yeah, we're not
If it meets the parameters of our code, legally, we cannot deny them.
Why are we here then tonight?
To see if it meets the parameters of our code and look at the plan. Hopefully, we can give them some suggestions to make it the best plan possible. We
Okay.
pass that on to the city
So
council.
what is being asked is just a little bit more time, okay? And one of the things is this plan was not made available to anybody, including you, the full plan, until last week. So it was a week ago, on the 18th of August. That's when the full plan in its entirety was made available. So now you are asking us to take our 3 minutes to give you a little bit of, information and give our feedback when this was just received a week ago?
You didn't go to the meeting that was?
No, I could not go to
No?
the meeting, no. But nor would I know how to even answer or ask questions if the plan in its entirety was not presented until 1 week ago. Okay? So please, gentlemen, and, understand that we did not, when we opposed things last year, it was based on the road. That was what's going on. That was, everybody's concern was the road.
That main road, right?
Yes, at the time, we were told that there would not ever be buildings allowed in the hollow. So why would we then worry about the hollow? The hollow is not buildable, okay?
It's still not buildable. That wetlands, they cannot build on it.
Yeah, well, they can put within an inch of the green wetland.
Right,
So
but
that-
it's still
that's-
not buildable.
That's still a little bit intrusive on that space. So, but look.
Well, I mean, if the Army Corps says they can build in a certain area, then they're entitled to build in that area.
So, let me tell you about the Army Corps, okay? My son's in the military, so I have a little bit of insight on this, plus I've talked to them quite a bit. They're completely overworked, okay? They're completely overworked, they can't handle the amount of work that they have. So what happens, and it happens in this case as well, is a developer will hire a consultant, and they will do a wetland assessment, okay? It's basically a way to have somebody else do the assessment instead of burdening the Army Corps with that assessment. They will then take that assessment and they'll go, oh, thank you, because now our workload has been just reduced by about 90%. Now I can look through it, hey, everything looks good, check the boxes, all right, good, you're good to go. That's how it works. That is how it works. So in this case, we have the developer has hired a company, which is fine, but you got to understand that the outcome that you're going to get from the Army Corps is completely dependent upon the individual who is handling that. It's not a standard protocol. We wish it would be, but it's not.
So the Army Corps had no rules or regulations as to
They
what a
do.
wetland is or not?
They do have rules and regulations. So does my son in the military. But you will find that all individuals are acting very differently according to those rules and regulations. So I don't have the faith in that you necessarily do. And at this point, I'd like to point out that, for instance, in the assessment that the developer had done by a company called Wetland Resources, this is what you'll see in the packet right here. This shows in the lime green very, very carefully. It gives you the borders of all the wetland. This is the wetland delineation that would be handed over to the Army Corps. And the Army Corps would look at it and look through everything else, and they'd go, yeah, it looks good to me. So, but if you overlay that on Google Maps, okay, what's remarkable about this is that it is remarkably consistent. The two are very, very consistent, except where the road crosses. And then suddenly, the assessment that was done by Wetland Resources shows the wetland half as wide as Google Maps. So there is a discrepancy there, and if that's correct, that's where the wetland actually is, its borders actually are, then great. We still need an explanation for why there's a discrepancy like that. If it's not correct, then there's an error and it needs to be corrected. And I have to say, it does look a little odd. Why is that it's literally half as wide?
I would agree, it looks, especially right where the bridge is.
I know what you're
going.
talking about.
Yeah, we have it right here on our thing.
Well, what you'll see there is an overlay with Google Maps. So you'll be able to see that the first page that you may see there is the lime green. That is Wetland Resources draft of the delineation. The next one you'll see is Google Maps alone. The third one you'll see as an overlay. and you'll see a huge discrepancy in how wide the wetland is at that area. So there are issues that way. Now, the problem with that, you hand that over to the Army Corps of Engineers, again, overworked, and they tend to look at it, well, it looks like it checks all the boxes, we're good. And the other problem...
What do you do, just wait for the Army Corps to catch up, or?
I think one of the things that you do is Highland City is you realize that this error needs to be partially corrected by us in Highland City. It has to be, we need to take some ownership over that.
We don't, it's private property. We can't just go in and say, this is wetlands and this isn't because we're Highland City and that's the way we like it.
If you don't participate in that, you can be viewed as being complicit in an error that is being passed on to the government. And let me tell you what the incentive is for the developer. So the developer, if that area is half as wide as what it should be, right? There is a tipping point with a wetland. If you're disturbing 1/2 acre of wetland or less, then you get easy rules. Easy rules, okay? If you're disturbing a 1/2 acre or more, above a 1/2 acre, then suddenly you got some really hard, stringent rules that take time, that are difficult, more expensive, and so forth. So it gives an incentive for shall we say, stretching things, okay? And especially if you are a body who is paying for the assessment from somebody else. So as Highland City, I don't think we want to be part of that. I don't think we want to be viewed as being complicit in an error like that when it's being shown to you right now.
We also have to be careful we don't get sued. We can't dictate private property rights.
Well, true, and not sued just by the developer, by other people who feel like you're being complicit in an error. Okay, so you gotta understand that's the reality. So that's one thing, and then I just want to bring to your attention again. We're asking just for some time, and you know what? We're talking about a different type of meeting than you're talking about. We're talking about a sit down to actually discuss. And when you say that there's no money for it, there actually is money for it. There are private donors that are willing to pitch in and help the city buy this piece of property. So I get that Highland City may not have the piece of property, but you've got private donors ready and willing to jump in significantly to help them purchase that. And so this would be an awesome sort of thing for the Highland City to own and maintain. Besides that, it would be a great feature for this development. Okay, I just want to summarize real quickly what we've talked about tonight, and I think they're all important points. And that is, we're calling attention. We've shown up today to spend our 3 minutes calling attention to serious matters involving the safety of the trail. And when we say it's 1,000 yards without emergency access, that does mean 10 football fields. That's not just the new part. That's half of it is the new part, half of it is the current part, right? So you got a safety issue there. We are calling attention to the lack of enforcement code. And again, yeah, there's all sorts of regulations regarding wetlands. Nobody's enforcing it. There aren't any wetland cops. So you can have all the regulations you want in the world, but if nobody's out there watching and nobody's out there levying fines, then nothing is happening. You can have all the regulations in the world. So that's an issue. It needs to be addressed. If we're going to do this way and cut it up into 10 lots, then there has to be something more set as far as how that enforcement goes. We're calling attention to the misleading information which is on the city website right now that says that the path would go on the western side. And this is proposing that it goes right down the eastern side along the fence line. And last year, when we complained about the road, what we were told again and again is, well, you should have done your homework. You should have done your homework. You should have known that there was going to be a road through there. Well, now we're telling you, we did do our homework. We did our homework. We saw that the path was going to be on the other side. And suddenly, just like that, it's changed right behind our fence line. We're also here to point out that the setbacks of the lots in the hollow overlap the wetlands. and I'm sorry, those guys are overworked. I don't have confidence that they're gonna fix that. We're here to point out that what appears to be a significant discrepancy in the delineation of the wetland right at the road. It's odd. I don't know why it's happening there, but it's odd. And we're just asking you to not approve it tonight. Not approve it with contingencies. We're asking you to just say, hey, we need some time to look at this. And the fact, again, that we received the plan in its entirety 1 week ago is simply not enough time.
And I understand what you're saying, but you know what's gonna happen? We'll postpone it to the next meeting, and then people still won't like it. And we'll have to postpone it, and people still won't like it.
But don't you still owe them a little time? Don't you still owe?
I'm not saying we're gonna pass it, I'm just telling you what's gonna happen. I've been doing this for a long time.
I understand. But I think we are owed some time. And that's all we're asking. And I'd love to talk to the developer tonight about how we can make this work. I was the one that made the video. I won't talk a lot about that tonight because, we've made some other points, but it's a special place. And Highland is gonna lose out if we're not careful.
And I think most people in Highland are on your side. We wanna preserve as much of Highland as we can. We're just bound a little bit by private property rights.
I understand that, but if we're willing to think and sit down together and figure things out, I believe that we can. And so, and we've pointed out significant technical problems with this site plan, and we're asking you not to approve. So, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, Derek. Are you done, Polly?
I just want to give you a list of 5 ways that this code, based on your code, this isn't ready to be heard. So I told you the water and sewer approval, the soil report, the subdivision layout provision 58101, set sub 2, says that environmentally sensitive areas such as wetlands are located within a proposed subdivision. The subdivider shall identify and provide means to preserve those features as part of the proposed subdivision. And then, so that's 3. 58104, all subdivisions shall result in the creation of lots which are developable and capable of being built upon. And what you're being asked to do tonight is approve lots which are not going to be buildable. So that goes against it.
You don't know that.
But you don't know it either. So
well, according to the plan that they've submitted with their wetlands drawing, they have a plan for it, and they say it is buildable.
But we're waiting for the Army Corps, so let's get the information from the Army Corps. I mean, I think that the idea too, I think waiting 30 days where you have a preliminary plan that was just issued a week ago, even if the plan was in the works, I mean, it wasn't, you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, the wetland, so that, the plan came out after that development review meeting. And on top of it, the wetland report just was done in July, like barely 5 weeks ago. So this is moving really fast. It's not unreasonable for the public to say, hey, just let's give it one more meeting. And even if they come back, even if everyone comes back and they say we still don't like it, at least they have that opportunity to try to talk to the developer, to try to get more information, and maybe give you concrete feedback as well to make it a better plan. And I think that's what everybody wants. And then that last one, which I said before, is just minimizing the changes and revisions. So by saying, hey, let's just give it one meeting, I think you're following the code because there are those deficiencies. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. I think it makes it for a better, you get to do a better result when you ask hard questions, and so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you. All right, Troy.
I'll only take a minute since we went over on a few other ones. So I'm actually from Alpine, lived here my whole life, Troy Gokritz. I've followed this builder for quite some time. I think you guys have really kind of nailed it on the head, like as far as a developer goes, like they're top notch. As a young family looking at maybe upgrading or building at a different location, that's kind of one thing that I've looked at through these lots is maybe moving my family over here to Highland. And so I'm all for having a beautiful subdivision. I understand the wetland situation. These guys, you know, are conservationists, and understand what wildlife needs to survive and what's beautiful, and, you know, the money that will go into that subdivision will be quite a bit to make it a really beautiful place to live for young families to come and settle in Highland. And so, as I've seen Alpine develop, that's one thing, is having good developers that have a mindset on families and developing a good portion of the city that families are going to want to be outside and kids are going to play in the streets and that type of environment. So, for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, appreciate your comments. Becky?
Hi, my name is Becky Brower, and we butt up to the hollow there, and so obviously I've been watching this quite a bit. I just had a couple of questions. First of all, would it be the city that would be taking care of the trail system if that were put in? Okay. And I've noticed that many of the trails around there are not well cared for, so I am concerned about the long trail. So a lot of this stuff has already been taken care of. The other, we've lived here since 2008, with a little bit of a stint other places, but we started out on Hidden Pond and with that trail going behind our house. And I know that there were a few of my neighbors who would tell us, well, this is my land, I should be able to develop it, and they have. And I have never seen Army Corps of Engineers ever come and check on this or give any kinds of fines for, and I just imagine that as these people, if they're going to be building into these houses and they've got this property, they're going to eventually just keep encroaching, and nobody's going to come and check them. And so I'm concerned about that, and so I'm glad we're having this discussion today. Like everybody else has said, we just need a little bit more time to kind of work with the developer to come up with a plan that'll work for everybody. We all knew that this was going to be developed eventually, and I don't have a problem with that. And last year when this came up, it really was about the road. They weren't planning on doing anything with the wetlands, so it really has come down to the wetlands again. And
It was
I
the
know,
lot number too.
I'm sorry?
It was the number of lots that people were complaining
And the number of lots, yeah, absolutely. And so it has nothing to do with this plan. This is a completely different plan, and so we just need some time to talk to the developers and come up with a plan that's really going to work. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I hope we'll come up to a good solution for everyone.
Thank you, Becky. Okay. Developer, you want to come address some of these issues? I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Tyrell Gray.
Tyrell.
Millhaven Development. We are asking for approval tonight, and at the end of the day, I think that's kind of what, to us, is the biggest concern. I know everybody here is asking one more meeting. As you guys understand, that's a lot of money. It's not just that simple to us. This has already been delayed over a year. A year ago, we had this plan, and we came in, and as you mentioned, we're willing to do 79 lots. We'll give you guys the wetland totally preserved. There was such an uproar about it, we said, okay, we won't try to get the higher density, we'll just do exactly what the code is asking. And that's what we're asking for tonight. We're not asking for anything outside of that code. I want to address a couple things real quick. The Wetlands Delineation Study, I know we've got Google Maps and we're doing overlays. The Wetlands study that was done, it's not done off of just coming out and looking in July at what the wetlands are at. It's historical data that's done over 20 to 30 years of time. Those studies are very precise. And so I know, as Derek mentioned, yeah, the Corps they're overworked. Sure they are. I'll tell you something I've done in the past, and it's not something we're doing here. This is an area that would be perfect for me to apply for a LOMAR with the Corps of Engineers. What's been done above this building area and below this building area, what we've talked to with our engineers, with our attorneys, we believe that we could shrink this down to an area less than 10 feet on either side. We're not doing that. I'm not coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to shrink this down and put in the biggest lots that we possibly can. Our goal at the end of the day is to build the nicest subdivision that we can, and we do think this adds to that aesthetic. We are willing to sell those lots. They're for sale. Like you said, Mr. Kemp, if the city, and that's one thing my partner and I were talking about back there, we are looking for approval. If it's a contingency that you guys want to say that those last 9 lots cannot be buildable until that is all 100% cut and dry, I'm fine with that. I think somebody also mentioned it, that's a risk that we're taking. We're taking that risk right now, going off of that historical data and off the wetlands, because the Corps could come back and say, nope,
So what has
it
your
goes higher.
conversations been with them? Anything, or you
Yeah,
have to
so
submit
the-
your report to them for approval, or what's the
Yeah,
timeframe on
so
that?
everything's been submitted in, so we've already done the study, we've submitted the information into the Corps of Engineers. It's a governing process, so it's gonna take them time. I actually sent an email, we were sitting back there and just tried to get an update on, hey, exactly how fast can we get this done? Because it is something, as you know, that we'll have to have before we can build on those lots. But that's the risk that we're taking, and right now,
That you don't have to have, or you do have to have?
we do have to have.
You do have to have, right?
Yeah, we'll have to
And
have.
what
it for sure.
phase is that, those lots?
Well, and that's what I said, we're willing to pull those out and say we'll do those very last. If that's something that is the major concern, yeah, we
That
can do
seemed to
that.
be the sticking point here.
The only other sticking point was the trail. Our understanding from the city was that was something that the city would desire, and it's something that's an expense for us. Two issues there. It's obviously something that's just coming out of our pocket. There's no real huge benefit or monetary return for us, but it does address the issue of fires. If there were fire down in there, it does give access for the fire department to come in and put those fires out. Typically, you don't see a lot of fires in wetlands areas, thus being wetlands. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's very rare. I think that's pretty much everything that we had. Like I said, we're willing to address those with the city. If you guys don't want to put the path in, we're fine with that. If you do want the path in, we're fine with that as well. But we are asking for approval tonight. We are conforming to all the codes and all the statutes, and we did apply with those before any changes have been made. And we would ask for approval tonight as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a question for the developer, if I may.
What's that?
I have a question for the developer, if I may. Have you ever been in a situation in which you work with Army Corps, and just like the gentleman here was pointing out, they never get back to you, and they're just relying on the study that you have provided to them, and they use that as a...
Great question. The Army Corps of Engineers, Derek is right, they are overworked, but they have policies and procedures that they have to follow. One of those is they will do an on-site visit. It's not something that they just rubber stamp. They do go through and make sure all that information is right, but they will be there. That is one other thing I would like to address as well. I can't remember who the gentleman was that was concerned about regulations. The regulations on wetlands are on a federal level. Talking about the fires, anything that the city wants, those homeowners will be held to those same requirements as far as having fires in their backyards. But anything in the wetlands, that's federal. So those requirements and those building codes are way more stringent than anything that a city would
Do you have
ever
an
require.
HOA here?
No HOAs.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on how you might enforce that wetland, or not enforce it, but any stipulations you would
No, that's
add to those
out of my
lots,
purview,
or-
and I'm not gonna pretend to be a wetlands engineer. That's something that's governed on a federal level, and we're not gonna touch it.
Is
Like,
there
we don't build in
something-
it, we won't mess with them.
Excuse me, is there something that the city does so residents in that area are where federal wetlands begin and where the property line is?
Great question. It will actually be, when they buy the lots, it will be defined on they buy the lots. It's recorded against the title on the lots.
Right.
Those areas, they have to be defined when they purchase them.
We're also requiring a split rail fence along the delineation boundary.
So it'll be fenced off.
So they will know, homeowners.
So, it
Yep.
needs to be recorded.
He is
Come right here, Derek.
Just give them some space with the whole thing going on. Yeah.
I talked to the Army Corps of Engineer this morning at the Bountiful office. I talked to the representative whose name is Hollis Jenks. He is over this particular issue right here in Highland, this development. He says he's never seen the submission. He doesn't know anything about this. Said that this morning.
So your main issue is the wetlands, correct, on these lots?
My main issue, yeah, absolutely.
So if we approve this and hold off on those lots, what's your objection to that? I'm just curious.
Okay, first.
Yeah, you're fine with everything else, but just not the wetlands,
Tyrell,
right?
were you the developer a year ago? Our partner. Who is that? Mark. Okay. And so I want to point out that Millhaven was not. Millhaven was not the developer a year ago. So when we say that, hey, we're waiting this long and we're paying all this money and it's costly to us, we've waited for a year, that's not correct. I'm sorry.
How do you think that's not correct?
It's not correct because
That's my business partner,
Yeah.
and we have an entity that is controlling this property.
your name was never on that.
It doesn't matter. It's the same entity.
Yeah, sorry, it
So I
wasn't on it.
purchased into that entity.
Guys,
Okey
yeah,
dokey.
if you guys want to discuss that later, you can. That's okay. Yeah, we're not going to get into
Regardless.
that. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
follow-up
Appreciate you
question
addressing
for
those
you.
questions. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question. I wanted to ask, just by your experience, how long in the past have you been delayed by the Army Corps? Kind of give you the buy-off to build some of
It
these?
depends. The longest I've ever been is doing a LOMAR, going in and getting those wetlands completely eliminated or down as small as we can possibly get them, could take up to 6 months. We're not asking for that in this situation. We're saying that we will go with the historical data and leave the wetlands as they currently are proposed, as they're currently defined.
So you're saying you could get them smaller if you wanted, but you decided to leave them.
That's what the wetlands and our attorney both believe. Both of those came back and said, look, you guys need to shrink these down. If you look at what's been done above and the building that's been done above and below, the stream, give you an example. I walked the property a couple months ago with the individual that's got the property for sale. When he first originally bought that property, he said that that stream was 6 to 8 feet wide. And he goes, it was a flowing stream. He goes, there was a ton of water. It's just not anymore. And so our belief is that we could get that completely eliminated. There's a couple reasons we don't want to do it. One, we don't think it benefits the city. Two, we don't think it benefits our residents. And three, it's a lot of time. And we don't have the time to just spend and sit here and waste. We're trying to develop that property.
But potentially, if we break it down by phase, just like Chris was recommending, by the time you get to that section, you should have the buy-off from the Army Corps.
Everything. We have not closed on the property yet.
Okay.
Yes, our expense in planning and engineering and design, my personal expenses.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. If we have any other questions for you, we may call you back up. But, okay, we'll take a few more comments, and then we're going to talk about this.
Would we have any issue if they said, great, we won't develop that until the end, so we'd approve it without developing that spot? My problem with that is that there's that inertia that happens, right? But here's the plan, here's the road. I got to imagine if they said you cannot build there, the Army Corps says you can't, that they would redesign that stuff that's going on. So if they start building everywhere along that one, then you're approving a plan preliminarily that's not really the plan that's going to end up. So why wouldn't you wait until you have the information to approve a preliminary plan that really is preliminary, not contingent upon...
You want us to wait 6 months until we hear from the Army Corps of Engineers?
Or until there's a plan that comes from conversation with the developer, with the very invested, folks here that are showing up now that we've seen the plan, say maybe there's something that we could look at that we all could agree preserves that concern, which is let's not let that place go away. We say we can't do certain things. There are things you can do because it is a wetland. That's my point. It's not a particular piece of property. There are some other jurisdictions and interests that are at play that you probably want to consider before you preliminary approve it. It's not a typical piece because of that piece. So for me, I'm still saying, oh great, the developer says, we're not going to develop those 10 lots, go ahead and approve it. And that's, to me, I think that, I can't imagine the developer would say, great, we'll just leave the road there.
They have a ton of work to do before they ever get to there's no way, even if we prove this tonight and fast track it, they'd have that in before winter. You're looking at the earliest next spring or summer, right? The very earliest.
I can't imagine they wouldn't redesign if they couldn't build on those lots, they wouldn't redesign their...
They're not going to be putting that road in till next spring, the earliest. I guarantee it. We're already at the end of August. By the time you get through the city council another month from now, and do all your stuff, development takes a long time.
I get that. But
if they're putting any roads in this year, I would be surprised.
But that still says we're approving a plan that we think is it's premature. You don't have the information necessary with that contingency, because I think that reflects everything. It reflects the road that's going to go through, that they have the safety concern. Why wouldn't you just allow a little time for those folks here to be more comfortable with what's going on as part of the community?
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Commissioners, I think there's a couple online that would like to...
Sure. Let's give those people a chance.
All right, Lane S., I unmuted you, and 48 6, I unmuted you.
Thank you. This is Kyle. Can I go ahead?
We can hear you.
Hi, this is Kyle Pettit. I live at 6642 Madison Avenue, so I am on what's going to become the east-west corridor, I believe. And I agree and concur with all the comments made about the wetlands, et cetera, and would like to preserve that. Equally concerning to me, however, is traffic, given that my front door faces Madison Avenue. I haven't heard anything or any discussions or seen anything about traffic calming. A neighbor of mine, two houses south of me, Dan Campbell, put in an email today and representing many homeowners around this area, and I think all of us would agree who are on that email that we need to have some sort of way to slow traffic down and calming devices. I've heard it be commented in the past that snowplows would, if you have a speed bump, for example, would hit that, and it's not good for them. I disagree with that. My in-laws live in Sugar City, Idaho, and they have big speed bumps that are put in outside of the winter season, and they're removable, and they're very functional when there's not snow present. But they have heavy snow in the winter and snowplows that come through, and there are speed bumps, is what I'm saying, can be removed when the season for snowplows is going through the neighborhoods. I like Dan's comment about potentially putting a roundabout. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I would plea that we don't approve this tonight and have some further discussions with the homeowners. I have never been spoken to by the developer who is present there tonight. I would love to have him come and knock on my door and have a conversation with our neighborhood who's going to be living on that, or who lives on Madison Avenue, and the houses, a couple houses above and below that. We're very concerned about the traffic and the safety of what this is going to mean. If someone could comment on, is there any traffic calming devices in plan, please?
So Madison Avenue would be in the purview, and any traffic calming would be outside the purview of the approval of the preliminary plat, and something the city engineer would look at.
What about a roundabout with?
Sorry, didn't understand that.
What about traffic calming devices or a roundabout within the plat, as was suggested by Dan Campbell in the email today to the Planning Commission?
I have not seen that email, so I don't know, but that would be at the purview of the city engineer. It'd be something he could look at.
Okay, thank you.
Lane S is not accepting the unmute, so I'm assuming they don't wish to speak.
This is Lane Shelley. I live south of the development. I don't have any comments particularly right now. I do have a question, but I will address that via an email to the Planning Commission at a later time.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
We do not have anyone else on Zoom and no comment on YouTube Live.
Okay. I think you had a comment, right? Did you want to say something else?
Regulations and policies and procedures. And I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but he himself noted that, that's not up to them. It's really not up to the federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers, to come out and patrol the area. It's really going to be up to the city. So my appeal would be for the city to look at how that area is going to be regulated when there's multiple owners. And the only reason I'm persistent is because I was an FBI agent for 22 years, and policies and procedures and regulations are very, very important to maintain order and control. And so we're looking for order and control in that area, and I think it's going to be up to this government to do that.
That's something you'd have to ask the city manager if they want to create a new body to patrol wetlands.
Not to patrol, but to have policies and procedures that exist to put
Okay, have the
order.
policy and procedures, but nobody patrols it. You just said somebody needs a patrol.
Well, if it's the homeowners that have to do it, the ones that are on the other side, then that should be in some type of regulation. If something is seen that's in violation, then you report it. But
How does the city
absent-
deal with wetlands, Nathan?
So the city enforcement, generally speaking, is complaint driven. So if somebody encroached, somebody would file a complaint and then we go investigate and go from there.
And if it was regarding wetlands, would they call the Army Corps of Engineers, the city, or what would they do at that point?
Good question.
The Army Corps, they have a hotline. People can call in and report complaints. And they can come investigate and potentially result in tens of thousands of dollars of violations.
So the regulations are already in place, the
Right.
federal regulations.
Right, exactly. But my point is, everybody seems to have a different opinion how it should work. But the city needs to say, okay, here, they exist, so the city can say, okay, this is what exists and this is how it works.
I think what the city would do is just take the federal regulation for wetlands and say, this is what exists.
Exactly.
Well, that's already in
But
place,
it needs
though.
to be, it needs to be done, because everybody's talking.
But that's already in
So
place.
because this area is not in an HOA, in which already establishes kind of a community neighborhood government, it doesn't have that. The community is completely welcome to create their own body, like a neighborhood watch, for an area that they want to have protection over. They want to make sure things are regulated, and they would report it to the right place. So that's completely within the citizens' prerogative, and you guys seem very collaborative and willing to work together on this. So this is something that a community group can do, whether you have an HOA or not.
Thank you. All right, let's close the public hearing and then let's have some discussion on this.
Chris? If we may, just a couple of things. We go to that trails map. So I'm going to address a couple of things quickly, then turn some time over to the city attorney, and he's going to address a couple of things. What you have before you is the trail master plan. There was a lot of conversation of, well, the trail master plan shows it at X location, and this is actually at Y location. As you know, the general plan, land use map, or whatever map that we have is general. When you look at a scale, you know, these are 11 by 17 maps. We're showing lines on a map that we would like a trail in this area. In this particular instance, you know, some could argue that's the bottom, and then that shows the water. What's more important, though, is when you look at something like this, is that the desire is to have a trail in this area. And as Tara mentioned, the developer is under an obligation to provide this trail. He has agreed to do so, which is...
he is under obligation?
Is not under obligation. He is providing this at no cost to the city. Potentially, if we wanted it, he could ask us to pay for that, but he is providing this at no cost to the city. So we're lucky to get a trail and a trail corridor in this area at no cost to the city. Second, as far as the length of the trail, yes, it's lengthy. We have been working with our fire department to ensure that this corridor can be accessed, not only for fire, but if there was any type of accident or anything that could be, if anybody got hurt or anything like that, that they can get in there and serve that. Those were the two things that I had on the trail corridor. So anytime you see a trail on a map, know that's a general location and not a specific location. Rob, would you want to go from there?
Sure, I'll touch on a couple of things. First, to touch on the wetlands issue. Wetlands are under the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. They're the navigable waters of the United States. Cities cannot promote regulations over the wetlands themselves. Now, you could do something along the lines of an information campaign, just the city says, hey, there are wetlands in this area. If you see a violation, here's the number or way to report it to the Army Corps of Engineer for them to investigate. That's something the city absolutely could do. Another issue with wetlands, under the Utah Code, a city cannot treat any land as a wetland unless it has been designated as such by the federal government, by the Army Corps of Engineers. So in this case, where there has not been a designation broader ever, I think we looked at a few delineations that were done in the past. They're doing a newer one now. The city cannot say the wetlands are larger than they are unless the Army Corps of Engineers comes back and says that's where they are.
But there's existing maps for wetlands that go back years and years and years, right?
Correct. And that's why we requested that the developer go through this process to make sure we understood exactly where they were. But the city cannot say, you know, these maps show it here, maybe they're larger than that. You could say, you know, 30 years ago it was here. We will not approve anything within that boundary unless we get a current up-to-date delineation, which is what we are doing essentially by the stipulations. The other point I wanted to touch on is the entitlement to review and approval. They have submitted a complete application. Staff has reviewed it and found it to be complete and have all the documentation and information required. Accordingly, they could, if they wanted, delay, but they are entitled to substantive review and a decision by the Planning Commission, and they are, based on what I've heard, requesting that tonight.
Could we make a stipulation that those wetland lots are developed last, or in the future, or delayed somehow?
The stipulation already does somewhat include that, with they're not going to be able to be buildable until the wetland delineation is complete. And the developer indicated that they would be fine with a stipulation. You could add in an 11th condition that says those be the last lots developed within this subdivision. And I believe the developer indicated, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that would be fine with you.
Okay. Okay, so legally, there's nothing wrong with that?
No.
Okay.
And then to ease some of the concern that some of the residents had in terms of if the Army Corps comes back and said, let's assume, and said, yeah, you have to actually push that land further, they will have to revise that plan at that point. Is that correct? They absolutely would, and that would be a risk that they are taking on by beginning this process now. However, development does take a long time, but if it comes back, you know, if it somehow ended up, they built a road, and, I mean, if it impacted wetlands, first, they would be in massive trouble. Second, they would be required to revise their plans, but that is the risk the developer is taking on by doing it this way.
Because what we're discussing here, that I couldn't open from my phone, and the map is too small. Let's say that the lot that kind of push into the wetland, it's a 1 acre lot. And then as they go through the process and start building the face, and then... Sure. No. And then the Army Corps come back, says actually you have to shrink the lot. They can actually come back and say, no, you have to shrink it to 1/2 acre, and therefore the plan will be changed?
So the lot can contain wetlands.
Right.
The wetlands just define what cannot be touched. So that line, it could expand, and then they could say,
okay, I see.
The house cannot encroach on this, you can't have any accessory structures. I believe the developer also had a comment to that.
So I'm Jeremy Ackley, I'm with Millhaven. As far as that goes, if the Army Corps of Engineers came back and said, hey, you're too close, we need to move that, we're not just going to move the 10 lots and now we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner. Those 10 lots would also be included into a phase that we could adjust the other side of the road so that we could actually move it if needs be.
Right.
So just, Nathan, they can't even get a permit to start the road until the Army Corps of Engineers approves it, correct? So there's not going to be a scenario where they start a road and the Army Corps says, oh, that road's in our wetlands. They won't even get a permit.
You're referring to Canal.
The what?
Canal Boulevard is what you're referring to, or Madison Avenue?
Any of the roads. But that road that runs parallel with the wetlands area, I mean, to get a permit, they're going to have that resolved prior to that. And what they're saying is that takes 6 months to have done, and so they're going at risk. And if something has to change, it'll happen at the plat stage, and they'll have to go back, and that was done at risk. But if all goes well, the Army Corps approves, it matches what they did, and they keep going.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting stagnant for 6 months. But there's not a scenario where they're gonna have the road in. I mean, by then it's done. If you put the road in, the Army Corps is not gonna have you move it because you've already ruined it. You've already graded it, but that doesn't happen because they don't,
It'd be
yeah.
millions
He
of
has,
dollars.
he has to get that delineated prior before the project will even start.
Right. And we won't record a plat, which you can't do, build the road and all that stuff until we have that delineation.
Sure, quickly.
So,
We closed.
in a sense, they have to wait anyway for the Army Corps. So we're just saying, let's wait one more month. That's one thing. And the other thing is that Utah law has the ability, if they want to pull the ripcord as it is and ask for a decision within a certain amount of time, they have that ability. Right now, this application that's before you has only been submitted as of June. So we're talking about 2 months. So.
Our attorney said the application is complete.
Right, but there are 5 things that are still lacking.
We're gonna go with our city attorney.
But there are 5 reasons that you could wait for 1 more month.
Okay. All right, then, commissioners, let's start with Chris. What comments do you have?
Actually, just a question, and this is potentially larger than the specific development, but the ratty-looking trails, are there options to use some other substrate than asphalt? Because that deteriorates, gravel deteriorates, everything looks scruffy after a while unless we maintain it. And so I'm not necessarily proposing...
Maybe concrete, but still you have concrete breaks and cracks and chips too, so. I don't know. Yeah.
Something to look at. Over the last 2 years, the council has actually approved additional funding for trails. We just put $100,000+ into trails last fiscal year. We'll be putting 100+ this fiscal year into them also.
Okay. Audrey?
The same thing on the trails. I just know that we have a bunch we're trying to maintain, and I know that we don't have a significant amount of funding for it to maintain the ones we already have. So I'm curious why we need to have trails on both sides of this wetland instead of improving the one that's already existing.
It's actually just one side, the east side.
Yeah.
It's one side what?
The east side.
It is just on the east side, and it already exists.
Well, there's
Is
one
what
on the
you could say.
north.
Okay.
And this would
Sorry.
connect it.
I'm sure the developer would love to save the money and not have to put the trail in.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, pull up the aerial.
Thank you.
Okay, Claude?
Well, what I know is they're not asking for a rezone, they're not asking for a change in density, and a lot of these are ancillary issues that other bodies are going to have to decide, I think, like the Corps of Engineers and whoever else. I don't see.
Okay.
I mean, our hands are tied. There's only certain things we can do. This is the Planning Commission. This isn't a lawmaking body.
I'm just going to address 2 things, the trail and the wetlands delineation that he brought up with, the narrowing part. As I zoom into the topography would indicate that it does narrow in that location. And I would also think that during the planning of the main arterial road, they probably planned it to cross in an area that narrowed. And if there is historical delineations, I would just go back from prior to these submittals if that delineation was narrowed. Because the benefit of that narrowing is a couple things. If it's wide and you have to build a bridge over that, that's a very expensive bridge. We had a project where we were going to have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers to go inside those things to put the bridge in. It was a 1-year process. So we spent close to $1 million additional on the bridge to not touch the wetlands. And so I see optics-wise where this looks like, hey, this is pretty conveniently narrow right here, but as I zoom into the topography, And as I look at the road that's coming to go through the project, they probably planned it to hit that area for a bridge. But if they have the data, I would go look to see if the past delineations also show that. The other thing is this is delineated by a licensed engineer, who was putting his license on the line to forge a delineation, because these delineations are based on topography. And so if he's forged a topography that doesn't exist to get that, then he's put his license at risk for one client. And so I do understand exactly what you're showing me here. I don't have the exact, I'm just looking at the topography that was submitted here. But that's an avenue I would just double check, to make sure that, if you feel that that's being done maliciously, then maybe that's a way to go back and look at that. But the advantage is the bridge is a lot cheaper if that is smaller right there. As far as the bridge goes, I live in Bull River, and we had a trail behind our house that was supposed to go in. The developer didn't put it in, which was a mistake, but it was supposed to be a buffer between 2-acre lots and acre lots. I was glad it got abandoned. I didn't want a bunch of strangers walking in my backyard. 2 acres, I can't control who's back there. It's up on the thing. I think it is a concern that is such a long trail that even if I did fall, I would have to go through somebody's property to get to a road to stop the going. So my only recommendation, and the developer can look at this, but if that trail just moved over along the side of the road on the west side of the hollow thing, and then there was an easement put between 2 lots so the trail can then connect to the existing trail and continue on. Our trail systems need to connect, but they don't all have to be in hollows, and they don't all have to be in these wilderness areas. They can join onto a sidewalk and then have a connection to get back onto where the trail is, so that that's not just a dead-end trail.
Yep.
I also think it's security with kids and people going back there, and it's hard to control what's back there.
Well, the city doesn't have the money to maintain it anyway.
That's the only nice thing about the trail is if everybody is concerned about the hollow, which, again, looking at this topography, I don't think you can build you couldn't even put a shed on the other side of the trail. And if the hollow is as beautiful as the picture I just saw, the people developing these lots aren't going to destroy it. We have a dry creek that runs through our property. Nobody goes near that creek to build towards it because we're trying to preserve it. We're not going to go destroy it and put a bunch of garbage around it. We're going to keep it natural, keep it preserved. But the nice thing about that trail in the back is your neighborhood watch can walk back there, dial the 800 number, call Army Corps of Engineers. And when you make a complaint, I will say, I'm not happy with my government, but I can't change it. I'm not happy with the Army Corps of Engineers, but they're probably managing it on a complaint basis. If I get a complaint, I got to go look at it. If they violate it, because I came out here, I'm going to fine them to pay for everything that we're doing. I do know they love to fine because that's how they fund some of their stuff. So I funded a lot of their projects. So those are my two. As far as the rest of the plan, people have come up and said, we love everything but the hollow situation. I'm fine in the sense that this totally meets all the regulations. The only time we have power as a municipality against a developer is if they're asking for a rezone. If they want a tighter density, then we can say, protect that hollow, put the fences up, do all this stuff, make it a preserve, put a park bench, because we're negotiating. But when they come in and it's R40 and they're presented R40, there's not a whole lot. I didn't know what Nathan had just said, that you said along the delineation, there's going to be a split rail fence on both sides?
Is that required, or they're
on
doing
the east side or the west side?
West. Is that required by us or by who?
We have it in our code.
Okay, so that'll be between the person's
The
house,
house
their
and
yard, and there'll be a split rail fence
The
right
house and the delineation.
there. So it'll be easy to identify if one of those lot owners has violated the wetlands area, because it's going to be delineated at least on one side, and I don't see with the topography what can possibly be done on the other side. Even that trail is going to be a little difficult. But my only recommendation is I would run that, because that would split the trail in half. And if you get an access between 2 of the lots at the end of the cul-de-sac somewhere along there, then they can get back on the trail and complete it.
that's, unique connectivity.
I agree with what Jerry's saying.
But those are the only
half-
two issues that
Half of the people in the city, I think, love trails, half the other half don't want them, and.
It's the ones that.
Can I say one more thing, so not to
Sure,
make,
sure, go ahead.
anger my neighbors, is that I don't want that wetlands diminished in any way. I want it improved. Too bad we can't just leave it alone, but I have no illusions that we're gonna leave everything alone the way it is now.
Well, I like Jerry's idea on the trail, run that out there and for various reasons. All right. Entertain a motion.
But before
Do
we
you
make
want to
a
leave out?
Maybe we talk out loud a little bit about it.
Sure, we can talk out loud. Do you want, if you want to leave out those wetland lots for a while, or make them the last phase, or?
So my thought is that
But
we, go ahead.
Go ahead. The attorney just said that nothing can be done on those anyways without the Army. It's gonna be delayed anyways, so do we need to make a?
What's your, just so the public knows, what's your avenue of construction? Is it the northwest lots and then you're gonna come down, or what's your phasing look like?
I'm sorry, can you speak in the microphone?
Yeah, just talk to us about your phasing and when you anticipate getting to the wetlands lots.
So as far as the phasing goes, our first phases will be from 10-250, I think it's called, and it'll come down that, and then we'll have another phase on the north side that actually looks into the hollow before we actually get down to those lots that are in question with the delineation. And then we would have another phase that's on the south side of the main thoroughfare. So ultimately, we're thinking 4 phases.
Okay.
And we could make that one in question the last phase.
And when did you think, timing-wise, you would be to the hollow phase?
Oh, it's, like, at best, it's gonna be next fall, like, at best. So.
Okay.
So I think we'll be hitting the first couple phases in the spring, and potentially even the one on the south, we could be doing that in the spring, but it was always our intention to hit that one last.
That's assuming everything goes perfect, the economy
Exactly.
stays strong, there's no recession.
Yeah, there's a
and you
million
sell
things
out
that could
and
happen.
everything. Right.
But that's why we need the time. You know, they're asking for time. Well, we need time to actually keep this going.
Can I ask you one question while you're up there? Sure. So the very north road hits the T up at the top there? Yeah, that's better, thanks. Hits the T up at the top there, and I kind of remember this from our last meeting. Was there a discussion about putting that as a cul-de-sac dead end and having everybody go out on 200 north and then going to that other actual intersection?
So we're just talking about the road that connects.
Just right at the very top there.
Okay, yeah.
Was that something that was explored before, making that just a cul-de-sac?
No, we were told that it needed to go through for connectivity. And that's what that letter from Hales Engineering.
For the utilities?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Oh, it said you had to have that for, okay.
Exactly.
Because that would have been nicer to be a cul-de-sac, because that is kind of weird where it tees right at a curve. And then everybody could go out on 10-200. I just wanted to make sure that that was explored, but you're saying that you were told you had to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a bad intersection.
All right, you want to do a motion?
Where is the?
Chris, can I just say something as a citizen? It's not going to be a long soliloquy, I promise you. But just as citizens of Highland, I hope you understand, we're your neighbors. We're not here to box each other on the ears. And we're really grateful that you're all willing to come out to these meetings. And, you know, Jerry and Claude actually said it best. We, as a planning commission, have kind of limitations on what is appropriate for us to do. And this is what is called an administrative action. We really don't have the ability to do legislative stuff. That's the city council's purview. And so I hope you will be
sort of tolerant and aware of the boundaries that we function and operate in when a developer comes to us. And we're not, please don't interpret any of the discussion tonight as, we're not listening to go jump in the lake. We're very, very interested in your comments and in your thoughts. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. But that's why you get paid the big bucks to take the abuse, right?
Yeah, big bucks.
All right, I'll make a motion. I move that the planning commission accept the findings and recommend approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 10 stipulations recommended by staff. I think I would add the 11th to maybe revisit the trail location, both as a safety issue on the length and as a fiscal thing for the city in maintaining that road and for the homeowners that have to back up to that trail. And I was going to add the 12th one to hold off on those lots, but I think that they're being held off naturally with the 402 or 404 permitting that they're going to have to go through prior. So I wasn't going to add that one, just the trail one.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Claude. All right, we'll call for a vote. Chris?
Sorry, before we call for a vote, can I just, I will be more comfortable adding the 12 stipulation because it is true that they have to get their permit, but they also mentioned, and tell me if I'm wrong, that if we start grading and therefore they start impacting the wetland, they might be fined, but they potentially can move forward with the development. Is that correct?
They can't start grading until they have the approvals. We can't issue them a permit without it.
Go for it. Okay.
And
Can't
if
get a
I'm-
plat or anything.
And if I may, number 5, the final plat for lots 58 and 48 through 55 shall include a conservation easement and shall not be recorded until the wetland delineation has been approved by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
That takes care of it.
That does it right there.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. Chris?
Yes.
Audrey?
Yes.
Claude?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
I'm a yes, and Mino?
Yes.
Okay. Recommend that motion passes. The city council, I advise you all to go there and let them hear of your concerns, and they would be glad to hear from all of you. But we really do appreciate you coming up and telling us about these things. So time after time, we hear from people that we hear things that we haven't thought of, or ways to improve the trail or take a trail out. And unless you show up and speak your piece, we don't know. So thank you for coming.
Well, and all this goes forward to council as well.
It does. All our comments goes to them.
Yeah, just one little postscript to that, and that would be, please don't just assume that you should give up. I mean, it seems like the developer is very open and willing to chat to you, and so there's no reason why you can't have those sort of conversations, and they may be very amenable to some of the things that you bring up.
Just from a developer standpoint, they would be crazy to go anywhere near those wetlands because the fines are so astronomical. They would be nuts to go anywhere close to those wetlands.
I think it's self-governing. I think that
Unless they have a few $1 million and want to get in a lawsuit with the federal government over it, they would stay as far away from those as possible.
And after it is developed, if it is developed, particularly in those field lots, and even if it isn't developed, I highly encourage, and I think Highland City is good at this, there are groups that form for community service that help educate and can let the next owner that moves into the place be aware of the stipulations and where the wetlands are and what laws have been put in place, and that this neighborhood cares about it, and they'll be watching to help protect those wetlands. And that's completely what America's about. We get to do that.
A lot of us are going to be watching. Like I said, go ahead now.
I think the fact that you guys care is like gonna help, for sure.
Well, and a
you've
lot of
organized well.
I think a lot of people are gonna buy those lots because of the wetlands, and they want to preserve them and keep them, and that's what the natural beauty is. So it's like Jerry and his subdivision, you don't see a lot of abandoned tires or cars in the wetlands because you just don't pay that much money for a wetland lot and ruin it. Okay, item number 4. This is a public hearing as well. We'll go ahead and open that public hearing. This is amend section, chapter 3, article 2 of non-conforming uses of the development code.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So staff has been working with the city attorney to update Chapter 3, Article 2, non-conforming uses, Section 3-615 and Section 10-102 and Section 11-102 in the Development Code relating to non-conforming uses. The purpose of this update is to modernize the language to be consistent with state law and be consistent with modern practices. The current code lumps all the non-conforming uses up together, and the update is needed to kind of break them apart. For some examples of non-conforming uses, there's building, the example on the left, when a building, for example, is set 25 feet back and the new code requires it to be 30 feet back. That would make the building a non-conforming use. So any additions or changes would need to meet the new code of that 30 feet. Another one is similar as the lot size of 125 feet frontage, for example, and the new code requires 130 feet frontage. And then the more complicated one would be more of a use. So for example, if a drive-through is allowed in the older code when the building was built, and then the new code says drive-through is no longer allowed in the zone. That would create that use to be non-conforming, and if the property is vacant for an extended period of time, the new tenant has to comply with the updated zoning use, so they'd have to pick a use that is permitted under the updated zone.
What's the extended period of time?
I believe it's, Rob, do you know?
A year.
A year? Okay.
It's presumed abandoned if it's been left alone for a year. You can maybe do it shorter, but the presumption is if you've left it for at least a year, you're not using that old use anymore.
And so, the various changes in different sections throughout the code are related to this non-conforming use, and the new chapter helps address that and breaks it up more, so it's a little bit more clear and they're not just lumped up together. As you can tell, the different examples, there can be different reasons or more information that would be needed instead of lumping it together. For citizen participation, the Planning Commission notification was posted in the Daily Herald and State and City website. We haven't received any written correspondence on that. And then for your recommended and proposed motion. I didn't include slides showing the various changes because it was rather lengthy. It is in your packet.
Yeah, I read through it. Okay. Any comments from the commissioner?
Can I make a motion?
Yeah, we'll close the public hearing, then we'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move that the Planning Commission accept the findings and recommend approval of the proposed amendment based on the following findings.
Okay.
I second it.
Audrey second, and Chris motion. So Chris, I assume you're yes. Audrey, a yes. Claude?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mino?
Yes.
Okay, great, that motion passes.
Hey, Tara, just so that you know, I read all of that, and it's a brilliant cure for insomnia, if anybody would care to read.
It's my job you're talking about.
I do beg your pardon, Rob. I thought it was muted when I said that.
Yeah, I read all 115 pages this afternoon, and that's all I could do to stay awake, so. Okay, what's your question?
Hey, Nathan, has anything more been done about the detached dwelling units, revising that part of the code, or do you know if that's something council is going to pursue or do? I get asked that probably at least every other week.
So like an accessory dwelling unit?
Uh-huh.
So we've updated the ordinance and it's been approved.
Detached?
Oh, detached? No, there hasn't been any as far as I know communication.
So there still has to be a little...
We talked about it at a global level, but we've been so swamped that we haven't, done anything about it
Okay.
or addressed it.
So with that, we have some rules as far as, affordable housing requirements, right? If you had
I thought this was.
ADUs, would that help with those affordable housing requirements or not? Does that help with
Maybe.
the code or criteria at all?
When
or-
you're, it could, when your accessory buildings are bigger than my house,
No,
I don't know.
no, I mean,
Your
an AD
detached-
We're talking-
an ADU with a
Yes.
restricted
No, I
600
understand.
square feet.
I understand,
Not
but when
another
you're.
house.
Yeah, we're talking like
But-
a mother-in-law flat or
Yes,
something
understood.
like that.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that was on the list the guy gave us.
Yeah,
And then we
Yeah.
made the changes for the attached stuff.
yes,
I just wondered if there was
we haven't done
restriction on square
anything with
footage.
that.
If you detach it, it could only be 600 square feet or 800 square feet.
No, we haven't done anything like that, but
Okay.
I say that in just a little bit, but, there's, they approved 10,000 square foot, accessory unit, so that's what, 3 times the size of my house, so. Yeah, so I had to say that in just a little bit, so.
Okay, anything else you need to bring up?
Not real.
I just had one other quick question.
Yep.
Because I did miss a couple things and I need to know. If it is within the dwelling and like a basement unit, they have completely decided what needs to happen with utilities? Question mark.
Yeah, it's just one utility. Yeah, no
No
more
separate utility? Oh, gosh. Yeah,
No.
thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
that
just
was
need a
the-
motion to adjourn from somebody.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, a second. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming, it's nice to see you all.
It was totally preserved, and all you had to do was approve an extra 7 houses. And they said, no, and now it's like, oh, but what about this? That was a cheap